The morning light filtered through the tall, arched windows of Riverside Chapel, casting soft patterns across the polished wooden pews. Natalie Bennett stood in the small preparation room, smoothing down the ivory silk of her wedding gown for the 100th time. Her reflection in the antique mirror showed a woman who should have been glowing with happiness, but her hazel eyes held a flicker of something else. Doubt, perhaps? Or intuition? Her sister, Rebecca, adjusted the delicate veil that cascaded down Natalie's back. The fabric had belonged to their grandmother, a family treasure that carried decades of happy marriages. Rebecca squeezed Natalie's shoulder gently, sensing her younger sister's nervousness. Everything will be perfect. Christopher loves you. This is your day. Natalie nodded, forcing a smile. Christopher Vale had swept into her life 18 months ago like a summer storm. Handsome, charming, and successful in his tech startup ventures, he seemed like everything she had dreamed of in a partner. Their whirlwind romance had been the envy of their friends. But lately, something had shifted. Christopher became distant, distracted, always buried in his phone or rushing off to meetings that ran late into the night. The wedding coordinator knocked on the door, her professional smile firmly in place. 5 minutes, Miss Bennett. The guests are all seated. Natalie took a deep breath, gathering her bouquet of cream roses and soft blue hydrangeas. This was it. The moment she had planned for 6 months was finally here. As she stepped into the hallway leading to the chapel's main entrance, she could hear the gentle murmur of 200 guests waiting inside. The altar stands empty. The processional music began, its familiar melody filling the chapel with anticipation. Rebecca walked down the aisle first, her burgundy dress swishing softly with each step. Then it was Natalie's turn. Her father, Thomas Bennett, took her arm, his weathered hand trembling slightly. As a retired schoolteacher, he had saved for years to give his daughter this wedding. "Are you ready, sweetheart?" His voice was thick with emotion. Natalie nodded, and together they stepped into view of the congregation. All eyes turned toward her, and she heard the expected gasps of admiration. But as her gaze traveled down the long aisle toward the altar, her heart seized in her chest. The space where Christopher should have been standing was vacant. Pastor Williams stood alone at the front, his kind face creased with concern. Christopher's groomsmen shifted uncomfortably in their positions, exchanging worried glances. The best man, Christopher's cousin Derek, was nowhere to be seen. The music continued playing, but each note now felt like a countdown to disaster. Natalie's feet moved automatically, carrying her forward even as her mind reeled. Her father's grip on her arm tightened protectively. The whispers started softly at first, then grew louder as they progressed down the aisle. "Where is the groom? What's happening? Did anyone see Christopher?" They reached the front of the chapel, and Pastor Williams leaned forward, his voice low and urgent. "Natalie, I'm so sorry. Christopher hasn't arrived yet. Derek went to find him about 20 minutes ago." The chapel doors burst open with a resounding crash that made everyone jump. But it was not Christopher who entered. Instead, Jonathan Pierce strode down the aisle with purposeful steps that echoed through the sudden silence. At 34, Jonathan was Christopher's business partner and the co-founder of their technology company. Tall and solid, with dark hair touched with early gray at the temples, he had always struck Natalie as intensely serious. Where Christopher was flashy and outgoing, Jonathan was reserved and thoughtful. The truth revealed Jonathan reached the altar, and Natalie saw something in his deep brown eyes that made her breath catch, pain, anger, and something else she could not quite name. "Natalie, I need to speak with you now." His voice was steady but urgent. "Jonathan." "This is hardly the time," Pastor Williams began. But Jonathan cut him off with a look. "She deserves to know the truth. Christopher isn't coming." The words fell like stones into still water, sending ripples of shock through the congregation. Natalie felt her knees weaken, and her father moved closer to support her. "What do you mean he isn't coming? Where is he?" Her voice sounded strange to her own ears, distant and hollow. Jonathan pulled out his phone, his jaw tight. "He sent me this text 30 minutes ago. I've been trying to reach him, trying to talk sense into him, but he's not answering." He held the screen toward Natalie. Through the haze of shock, she read Christopher's words. I can't do this. I'm not ready. Tell Natalie I'm sorry. I'm leaving town for a while. You handle the business. I just need time. The chapel erupted in a cacophony of gasps, exclamations, and shocked murmurs. Natalie stood, frozen, staring at those cruel, cowardly words. Not ready? After 18 months together, after 6 months of wedding planning, after standing before 200 people, now he decided he was not ready. Her mother was crying in the front pew. Her father looked ready to commit violence. Rebecca had covered her mouth with both hands, tears streaming down her face. Friends and relatives who had traveled from across the country to celebrate with her now witnessed her. Complete humiliation. The roses in her bouquet suddenly felt unbearably heavy. The dress that had made her feel like a princess now seemed to constrict around her ribs. The veil that represented tradition and blessing now felt like a shroud. An impossible proposal. Then Jonathan did something that stopped every whisper, every tear, every sound in that chapel. He stepped directly in front of Natalie, blocking her view of the pitying faces in the congregation. He took both her hands in his, the bouquet falling forgotten to the floor. Natalie Bennett, I cannot let you walk out of this chapel unmarried. Not like this. Not because of my partner's cowardice. What are you saying? Natalie whispered, afraid to understand. Jonathan took a deep breath, and to the absolute astonishment of everyone present, he lowered himself to one knee right there at the altar. Marry me instead. Right now, today, let me give you the wedding you deserve. Let me prove that not every man will abandon you when things feel uncertain. The chapel had gone so silent that Natalie could hear her own heartbeat thundering in her ears. This was insane. Jonathan barely knew her beyond polite small talk at company functions and the occasional dinner with Christopher. They had never been alone together, never had a real conversation that lasted more than 10 minutes. But as she looked down into his earnest face, she saw something that made her breath catch. This was not pity. This was not a performance. There was a fierce protectiveness in Jonathan's eyes, determination that spoke of deeper feelings than she had ever suspected. Jonathan, you can't be serious. This is crazy. Her voice shook. I have never been more serious about anything in my life. His grip on her hands tightened. I will not stand by and watch you suffer this humiliation because Christopher lacks courage. Marry me, Natalie. Give me the chance to be the man you deserve. Natalie looked past him to the congregation, to her family's devastated faces, to the friends who had cleared their schedules and bought expensive gifts. She thought about walking out alone, about the months of sympathy and awkward conversations that would follow. She thought about Christopher, who had proven himself a coward. Then she looked back at Jonathan Pierce, this unexpected man offering her salvation in the most shocking way possible. Yes, the word escaped her lips before she could second-guess it. Yes, Jonathan, I will marry you. Jonathan stood, and for just a moment, his composure cracked. Relief and something deeper flashed across his face before he turned to Pastor Williams. Then let's proceed with the ceremony. Pastor, we have a wedding to complete. Pastor Williams stood frozen, his prayer book hanging limply in his hands. The elderly minister had officiated hundreds of weddings over his 40 years of service, but never had he witnessed anything remotely like this. He looked from Jonathan to Natalie, then to the stunned congregation, searching for guidance that would not come. Pastor, please. Jonathan's voice carried quiet authority. Natalie has consented. The license bears my last name as well, since Christopher and I share the same surname through our fathers being brothers. We are cousins, not just business partners. The legal documents are valid. This revelation sent another wave of murmurs through the chapel. Natalie's mind spun. She had known Christopher and Jonathan were related somehow, but the family connection had never been clearly explained. Now this man, this near stranger who shared Christopher's bloodline, stood ready to marry her in his cousin's place. Thomas Bennett stepped forward, his face flushed with emotion. His hand remained protectively on his daughter's shoulder. Natalie, you don't have to do this. We can cancel everything, send everyone home. Your mother and I just want you to be happy. Natalie turned to her father. seeing the concern etched in every line of his weathered face. But she also saw something else. The mortgage he had taken on their house to pay for this elaborate wedding. The pride he had taken in giving his youngest daughter a perfect day. The savings account he had depleted for the reception at the Grand Harbor Hotel. Papa, I'm not walking out of here unmarried. Not after everything you and Mama have sacrificed. Not after everyone traveled so far. She squeezed his hand, then looked at Jonathan. If Jonathan is willing to honor this commitment, then so am I. Jonathan's expression softened as he met her gaze. There was gratitude there, but also something deeper that made Natalie's pulse quicken despite the surreal circumstances. Pastor Williams cleared his throat, his professional composure slowly returning. Very well, if both parties consent and the legal requirements are met, then we shall proceed. Though I must say, in all my years, this is certainly unprecedented. Vows between strangers. Pastor opened his prayer book with trembling fingers and began the ceremony. The traditional words spoken countless times before now carried entirely different weight. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to witness the union of Natalie Rose Bennett and Jonathan Thomas Pierce in holy matrimony. Natalie noticed. Jonathan's middle name matched her father's first name. Was it coincidence? Or was the universe conspiring in ways she could not yet understand? As Pastor Williams continued through the opening remarks, Natalie became acutely aware of Jonathan standing beside her. He was taller than Christopher by several inches, his presence more solid and grounded. Where Christopher always seemed to vibrate with restless energy, Jonathan projected calm steadiness. His hand, when he took hers for the vows, was warm and steady. Jonathan Thomas Pierce. Do you take Natalie Rose Bennett to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward? For better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health. To love and to cherish, till death do you part. Do. Jonathan's voice rang clear and certain through the chapel, without hesitation or doubt. When it was Natalie's turn, she found herself looking into Jonathan's eyes as she spoke. They were deep brown, almost black in the chapel's soft lighting, and they held hers with an intensity that made everything else fade away. The whispers, the shock, the scandal, all of it dissolved as she said the words that would bind her life to his. I do. The ring exchange proved momentarily awkward when Pastor Williams realized they did not have Jonathan's ring. But Jonathan simply removed a signet ring from his own right hand, a heavy gold band engraved with what looked like a family crest, and offered it to Natalie. She slipped it onto his finger, and it fit perfectly on his left ring hand, as though it had always belonged there. Jonathan then took the wedding band meant for Christopher and slid it onto Natalie's finger. The diamond engagement ring she wore suddenly felt like a lie, but the new band settled beside it like a promise, by the power vested in me by the state and by God. I now pronounce you husband and wife. Pastor Williams paused, then added with the faintest hint of a smile, You may kiss your bride, Jonathan. The first kiss for a heartbeat. Neither of them moved. This moment had not been in Natalie's rehearsals, had not been practiced or planned. Jonathan's hand came up to cup her cheek with surprising gentleness, his thumb brushing away a tear she had not realized had fallen. May I? He asked softly, his voice meant only for her. Natalie nodded, unable to speak. Jonathan leaned down slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away. When his lips met hers, it was gentle and brief, appropriate for the sacred setting. But even in that chaste kiss, Natalie felt something electric pass between them, a connection she had never experienced with Christopher. Despite their months together, when they parted, Jonathan kept his forehead pressed to hers for just a moment. We're going to be okay. I promise you that. The organ burst into the recessional march. Suddenly they were walking back down the aisle together as husband and wife. Natalie's hand rested in the crook of Jonathan's arm, and she could feel the strength in his steady pace. Unlike her entry when she had walked in as a bride about to be abandoned, she now walked out as a married woman beside a man who had chosen her when she needed it most. The congregation rose, their faces showing mixtures of shock, confusion, concern, and in some cases, dawning approval. Natalie's mother was crying harder than before, but now Rebecca stood beside her, a strange smile playing at her lips as she watched her sister pass. Reception of Revelations. The reception at the Grand Harbor Hotel proceeded with the surreal quality of a dream. The 5-tier cake still read Natalie and Christopher in elegant script, hastily covered by the coordinator with additional flowers. The place cards had been printed weeks ago with the wrong groom's name. The photo booth props included signs reading, Christophers, Mrs. and Bennett to Vale. None of it mattered. Jonathan handled everything with remarkable grace. He moved through the room, introducing himself to Natalie's relatives and friends, accepting their confused congratulations with dignified ease. He explained over and over with patient courtesy that his cousin had proven himself unworthy, and that he refused to let Natalie suffer for Christopher's weakness. As the evening progressed, Natalie found herself watching her new husband with growing curiosity. Jonathan danced with her mother, charming away her tears. He spoke earnestly with her father, assuring him the wedding expenses would be honored and that he would take care of Natalie. He even managed to make her young nephew laugh by performing a clumsy magic trick with a dinner napkin. During their first dance, a slow ballad that had been chosen months ago for entirely different circumstances, Jonathan held Natalie carefully. There was proper distance between them, respectful and appropriate. Yet his hand on her waist felt protective rather than possessive. "I need you to know something." Jonathan's voice was low, meant only for her ears as they swayed to the music. This wasn't entirely impulsive. Natalie pulled back slightly to look at his face. "What do you mean?" Jonathan's jaw tightened, and she saw vulnerability flicker across his features. "I've watched you for the past year. Every time Christopher brought you to company functions, every dinner we shared, every meeting where you stopped by the office, I watched you, and I saw things Christopher was too blind to appreciate." "Like what?" Natalie's heart hammered against her ribs. "Like how you remember everyone's names, even the junior staff. Like how you ask people about their families and actually listen to the answers. Like how your whole face lights up when you talk about your work at the children's literacy program." Jonathan's hand tightened slightly on her waist. "Like how you deserved someone who saw all of that and treasured it." Natalie felt tears prick her eyes again, but these were different from the earlier ones. "You barely know me, Jonathan. I know enough. And I want to know everything else, if you'll let me." His brown eyes held hers with earnest intensity. "I'm not asking you to love me today, Natalie. I'm asking you to give us a chance to build something real from this impossible beginning, a new understanding." The evening wore on, and slowly the shock began to fade from the guests' faces, replaced by something warmer. People who had come expecting one wedding witnessed something entirely different. A rescue, yes, but also the beginning of something that felt strangely right. Natalie's best friend, Carolyn, pulled her aside near midnight as the reception was winding down. She had known Natalie since college and had been the first to express doubts about Christopher months ago. "I know this sounds crazy, but I think you might have married the right man after all. Just not the one you planned to." Caroline squeezed her hand. "Jonathan looks at you like you're the only person in the room." "Nat, Christopher never did that." Later, as they prepared to leave for what should have been her honeymoon suite, Jonathan took off his jacket and draped it over Natalie's shoulders against the cool evening air. The gesture was simple, but spoke of consideration. In the car ride to the hotel, Jonathan finally addressed the elephant neither of them had mentioned. "I've arranged 4 separate rooms tonight. Despite the circumstances, I want you to feel safe and in control. We can figure out the living arrangements and everything else in the coming days." Natalie turned to look at him in the dim light of the car. "Thank you for everything today. For not letting me face that alone." Jonathan reached over and took her hand, threading his fingers through hers. "You'll never face anything alone again, Natalie. That's what today's vows meant to me. Not just rescue or pride, but partnership." As the car pulled up to the Grand Harbor Hotel, Natalie realized something remarkable. In the span of a single day, she had lost one future and gained another, completely unexpected one. She had been abandoned by a man she thought she knew and chosen by a man she barely knew at all. But as Jonathan helped her from the car, his hand steady and sure, She felt something she had not felt in months with Christopher. She felt hope. The autumn sun painted golden streaks across the hardwood floors of the downtown loft that had become Natalie's new home. 3 months had passed since that impossible wedding day, and her life had transformed in ways she never could have imagined. The spacious apartment belonged to Jonathan, filled with books and artwork that revealed depths to his character she was only beginning to understand. Natalie stood at the kitchen counter, preparing coffee in the early morning quiet. This had become her favorite time of day, these peaceful moments before the city fully awakened. Jonathan emerged from his home office, where he often worked late into the night, his reading glasses perched on his nose and his dark hair slightly disheveled. "Good morning." He smiled, that soft expression he seemed to reserve only for her. "Did you sleep well?" "Better than I have in years, actually." Natalie poured him a cup of coffee, remembering exactly how he preferred it. 2 sugars, a splash of cream. These small intimacies had developed naturally over the weeks of living together. They had maintained separate bedrooms, honoring Jonathan's promise from their wedding night, but the distance between them had gradually diminished in other ways. Shared meals became longer, conversations deeper. Jonathan would read passages from books aloud to her in the evenings. Natalie introduced him to classic movies he had somehow never seen. They discovered a shared love of Sunday morning farmers markets and terrible puns. The marriage that had begun as an act of rescue was slowly becoming something neither of them had anticipated. Something real. Jonathan set down his coffee and moved closer, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear, a gesture that had become familiar and welcome. "I have meetings all afternoon, but I was hoping we could have dinner together tonight. There's something I want to discuss with you." Natalie felt a flutter of nervousness. "That sounds serious, not bad serious. Just important." Jonathan's thumb traced her jawline softly. 7 o'clock at Riverside Bistro? She nodded, and he pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead before heading to shower and dress for work. These small affections had increased gradually, each touch asking permission. Each moment building trust between them. The past returns. Natalie spent her day at the Riverside Children's Literacy Center, where she had volunteered for the past 3 years. Working with struggling readers brought her joy that her previous job in corporate marketing never had. Jonathan had encouraged her to quit that unfulfilling position and focus on what truly mattered to her. He had even made a substantial donation to the Literacy Center. Though he insisted she not mention his involvement, she was helping a 7-year-old named Tommy sound out difficult words when the center's director, Patricia, appeared in the doorway looking uncomfortable. "Natalie, you have a visitor in the lobby?" He says it's urgent. Natalie's stomach dropped even before she saw him. Christopher Vale stood near the entrance, looking thinner than she remembered. His expensive suit rumpled, and his usually perfect hair unkempt. His blue eyes, once so charming, now seemed desperate. "Natalie, thank God. I've been trying to reach you for weeks." He stepped toward her, but she instinctively moved back. "You shouldn't be here, Christopher." She kept her voice steady, despite her racing heart. "Please, just give me 5 minutes. I need to explain. I made the biggest mistake of my life." Christopher's voice cracked with emotion. "Running away from our wedding was the act of a coward. I've regretted it every single day since." Natalie glanced at Patricia, who hovered protectively nearby. "Let's step outside. On the sidewalk, away from the curious eyes of children and staff." Christopher continued his desperate plea. "I was scared, Nat, terrified of commitment, of disappointing you, of not being good enough. But I've been in therapy, working through my issues. I'm ready now." "Really ready? You're 3 months too late, Christopher." Natalie wrapped her arms around herself, not from cold, but from the need to create a barrier. "But you can't actually want to stay married to Jonathan." Christopher's tone shifted, becoming almost pleading. "He's not your type at all. Too serious, too boring. He only married you to make me look bad, to take something that was mine." The accusation ignited anger in Natalie's chest. "I was never yours, Christopher. And Jonathan is twice the man you'll ever be. He didn't marry me to hurt you. He married me because he saw worth in me that you were too blind to recognize." Christopher grabbed her hand, his grip urgent. "I love you. I should have said it more when we were together, but I'm saying it now. Leave, Jonathan. Give me another chance. We can start over, do things right this time. Natalie pulled her hand free. Love isn't just words, Christopher. It's action. It's showing up when things are difficult. It's choosing someone every single day, not just when it's convenient. Jonathan has shown me more genuine care in 3 months than you did in 18, so you're actually developing feelings for him. Christopher's voice turned bitter. That's rich. You're falling for my cousin out of what? Gratitude? Spite? No. Because he sees me. Really sees me. Natalie felt tears threaten, but refused to let them fall. And because when I wake up anxious at 3 in the morning, he makes me tea and listens. Because he asks about my day and remembers the details. Because he makes me feel valued, not like an accessory to his life. Christopher stared at her as though seeing a stranger. You've changed. Yes, I have. And you need to leave now. Natalie turned toward the center's entrance. I'm not giving up, Natalie. Christopher called after her. I'll prove I've changed. I'll show you I'm worthy of a second chance. But Natalie kept walking, her resolve firm. Some chances, once lost, could never be reclaimed. Dinner and truth, that evening. Natalie arrived at Riverside Bistro to find Jonathan already seated at a quiet corner table. Candles flickered between them, casting dancing shadows across the white tablecloth. He stood when she approached, pulling out her chair with the old-fashioned courtesy that had become endearing. You look beautiful. Jonathan's eyes held unmistakable warmth. Though you also look troubled. Rough day? Natalie settled into her seat, debating how much to share. Christopher came to see me at the literacy center. Jonathan's expression darkened, his jaw tightening. What did he want? To apologize. To beg for another chance. To tell me he's changed. Natalie reached for her water glass, needing something to do with her hands. He thinks you only married me to hurt him. And what do you think? Jonathan's voice was carefully controlled. She could see tension in his shoulders. I think you married me because you have a protective streak. A mile wide and couldn't stand to watch me be humiliated. Natalie met his gaze directly. But I also think there might have been other reasons. Things you haven't told me. Jonathan was quiet for a long moment, his fingers drumming against the table in a rare show of nervousness. Then he reached across and took her hand, his thumb stroking her knuckles. The first time I saw you was at the company holiday party 2 years ago. Christopher brought you as his date. You wore a green dress and spent half the evening talking to our receptionist about her daughter's college applications. Jonathan's voice grew softer. Everyone else at that party was networking, trying to climb ladders and make connections. But you were genuinely interested in people's lives. I remember that night. Natalie's heart began to race. I watched you with Christopher over the following months. Watched him take calls during your dates, cancel plans at the last minute, forget things that mattered to you. Jonathan's grip on her hand tightened, and I hated it. Hated that he had you and didn't treasure you. Hated that I was his cousin and his business partner, which made you completely off limits. So when he didn't show up at the wedding, Natalie whispered, when he didn't show up, I saw an opening. A chance to give you what you deserved and to finally stop hiding how I felt. Jonathan's brown eyes glistened in the candlelight. I know it was selfish. I know marrying you that day was as much about what I wanted as it was about saving you from humiliation. Choosing the present, Natalie felt tears slip down her cheeks. But they were not tears of sadness. I spent 3 months thinking you married me out of pity or family obligation. That this was temporary, that eventually you'd regret the impulsive decision. Never. Jonathan stood and moved to kneel beside her chair, taking both her hands in his. Natalie, these 3 months with you have been the happiest of my life. Coming home to you, sharing meals, watching you curl up with a book on the couch. Learning that you sing off-key in the shower, and that you're afraid of thunderstorms, and that you cry at pet adoption commercials. You've noticed all of that? Her voice broke. I notice everything about you. Because I'm completely, desperately in love with you. Jonathan reached up to cup her face. I have been since long before I had any right to be. And I know we did this backward, that we got married before we even dated. but I want to do this right now. I want to court you, romance you, earn your love properly." Natalie leaned into his touch, her heart full to bursting. "Jonathan, you already have my love. It crept up on me over these past months. In the way you leave notes on the bathroom mirror, in how you bought me that first edition poetry book I mentioned once, in passing, in the way you hold me when I have nightmares about being left at the altar again. Those nightmares will stop, I promise." Jonathan stood, drawing her up with him. "Because I'm never leaving. Not tomorrow, not in 50 years. You're stuck with me, Natalie Pierce." The use of her married name sent warmth flooding through her. "Say that again, Natalie Pierce?" Jonathan smiled, that rare, full smile that transformed his usually serious face. "My wife, my love, my future." He kissed her then, not the chaste brush of lips from their wedding day, but a real kiss, full of passion and promise and 3 months of restrained longing. Natalie melted into him, finally allowing herself to feel everything she had been afraid to acknowledge. When they finally parted, both breathless, Jonathan pressed his forehead to hers. "Come home with me tonight. Not to separate bedrooms, but to our bedroom. Let's start the marriage we should have had from the beginning." Natalie nodded, unable to speak past the emotion clogging her throat. They left the restaurant hand in hand, leaving their dinners untouched on the table. The final choice, 2 weeks later. Christopher appeared at Jonathan's office building, demanding to see Natalie. Jonathan called her immediately. She arrived to find Christopher pacing the lobby like a caged animal. "I meant what I said, Natalie. I've changed. I'm ready to be the man you need." Christopher's desperation was palpable. "Just give me one chance to prove it." Natalie looked at this man she had once planned to marry. She could see he was sincere in his belief that he had changed. But sincerity was not enough, and change that came only after loss was not the same as growth that happened from genuine self-reflection. "Christopher, I hope you have changed. I hope you find someone who makes you want to be better. But that person isn't me." Natalie stepped closer to Jonathan, who had remained silent, letting her handle this herself. "Because I've found something with Jonathan that I never had with you." "What? Gratitude? Because he saved you?" Christopher's voice turned sharp. "No, partnership. Real partnership where we both choose each other every single day." Natalie slipped her hand into Jonathan's, feeling his fingers immediately intertwined with hers. "Where I'm seen and valued and loved for exactly who I am. You loved the idea of me, Christopher. But Jonathan loves the reality." Christopher stared at them for a long moment, and Natalie saw the exact instant he accepted defeat. His shoulders slumped, and some of the desperate fire left his eyes. "I really did love you, you know, in my own broken way." Christopher's voice was quiet now. "I know, and I forgive you for leaving." Natalie felt Jonathan's thumb stroke the back of her hand. "But forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. It just means I'm no longer carrying anger." Christopher nodded slowly, then turned and walked toward the exit. At the door, he paused and looked back. "Take care of her, Jonathan. She deserves the world, I know, and I plan to spend my life giving it to her." Jonathan's voice carried quiet conviction. After Christopher left, Natalie turned into Jonathan's embrace, breathing in the familiar scent of his cologne. "Thank you for letting me handle that myself. You didn't need rescuing this time." Jonathan kissed the top of her head. "You're stronger than you know." A love that began in chaos 6 months after their impossible wedding. Natalie and Jonathan stood on the beach at sunrise, renewing the vows they had made in chaos. This time, there was no crowd, no elaborate ceremony. Just the two of them, the waves, and a local minister who smiled at their obvious devotion. Jonathan had planned everything in secret. Wanting to give Natalie the romantic, intentional wedding moment she had missed the first time, as he slipped a new ring onto her finger, one he had designed specifically for her. His voice was thick with emotion. "Natalie Pierce, I vow to choose you every day for the rest of my life. To see you, value you, and love you through every season. You turned my desperate rescue into the greatest love story I could have imagined." Natalie's own vows came from a heart overflowing. Jonathan Pierce, you showed me that sometimes the greatest love stories don't begin with perfection. They begin with someone brave enough to reach out their hand when the world is falling apart. You are my unexpected blessing, my best decision, my forever choice. When they kissed as husband and wife this second time, it felt like both an ending and a beginning. The ending of who they had been before that fateful wedding day. The beginning of who they would become together. Later. Walking barefoot in the sand with their fingers intertwined, Natalie reflected on the strange path that had brought them here. She had been abandoned at the altar by a man too afraid to commit. She had been rescued by a man brave enough to risk everything. And in the process, she had discovered that sometimes the greatest love stories are not written in the plans we make, but in the chaos we survive together. Jonathan stopped walking and pulled her close. The morning sun painting them both in gold. I love you, Natalie. Today, tomorrow, and every day after. And I love you. Not because you saved me, but because you saw me. Natalie rose on her toes to kiss him softly. That's the real miracle. As they stood there, wrapped in each other's arms with the waves lapping at their feet, Natalie knew that Christopher's abandonment had not been a tragedy after all. It had been the unexpected doorway to a love far deeper and truer than anything she had dreamed possible. Sometimes the wrong person leaving your life is exactly what makes room for the right person to step in. And sometimes, just sometimes, love begins not with a perfect moment, but with someone brave enough to offer their hand. When your world is falling apart, their story had started in disaster and desperation. But it would continue in devotion, partnership, and a love that grew stronger with each passing day. Because the best love stories are not about perfect beginnings. They are about two people who choose each other again and again, building something beautiful from the most impossible foundation. This was their truth. This was their forever. And it had all begun with one impossible question asked at the worst possible moment, answered by the bravest possible yes.